What's up, everybody? It's 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, depending on where you're at. Brett Puffenbarger is joining us to today's episode because you're really popular on the social medias, and I wanted to, talk about social media and cannabis with you on the show. And then, Miggy, how's things going in your world, man?
Life's good, man. And, like we were talking backstage in the green room. Brett, I thought of you as a cannabis journalist, but how would you explain? How would you say explain yourself and what you are?
Me? Oh, geez. I guess I'm a public relations guy at the heart, right? I went to grad school for public relations. That's how I like to consider myself, though I think most other people would say I'm a lot of other things too. Though I will be honest and say that I color everything through a PR lens, right? Like I look at how it's going to impact the way people look at cannabis as a business. I look at how it's going to impact my clients or my friends or companies I'm associated with. And so, if anything, I am an intrinsically biased PR guy who just happens to like to pontificate on all of the BS and crazy stuff happening in the cannabis world on a day-to-day basis. And I think anybody who's been in cannabis for more than about 15 minutes knows there's no shortage of crazy things to talk about.
There is not. There is not. And I just did want to thank everybody for joining us for this episode of Cannabis Legalization News. One of the things that we're talking about today is these cannabis social networks and which one on social media is the best. I came by, Brett, on LinkedIn because you have a fairly large reach on the LinkedIn platform. Tell us about how you built that up.
So I'll be very honest with you. I was very specific in building my LinkedIn following and my LinkedIn network, and I did it in a very specific way. So I looked at LinkedIn as two things. One, it's a network of experts, right? It's the only place you can go where experts are talking about things they're experts in with the mask off. So for somebody like me who's, sales, marketing, business development, public relations, a lot of those things you can't talk about on other social media because then people feel like they're a number or a demographic or a factor in your business. But on LinkedIn, you can have those open conversations about specific things with other people who also do those things for a living. And then the other side of that is I look at LinkedIn as the world without gatekeepers. Your target audience isn't just Joe Blow weed smoker. It's not just whoever, it's decision makers, it's thought leaders, it's the people who matter in the industry at that level, right? Who can affect change, who can change the course of a company, who can do all of these things. So first and foremost, I knew that I was going to be a little bit of a firebrand when I started. So I was quiet for the first about year. I did nothing but comment lightly to get my name out there and add as many people as I could in the industry. And then I specifically and intentionally went with a very PR focused approach, right? So I wrote every post for the first couple of months like a press release, crazy headline that nobody's going to believe, and then a little bit of backing it up. And then you have in journalism or public relations, you have the idea of the fold, right? So it comes from old school newspapers, what's underneath where the newspaper is folded up and what's not. In social media, we have that as the see more button, right? Like everybody's used to a little version of the post. So I would put ludicrous stuff above the above the fold with the intention of people going, this guy's an idiot or this guy's crazy. They're going to click see more because my objective was to have them see more. And then I would structure it like a press release. I would write out like well thought out researched points. And then I would always end it with a question, because the last thing I want to do is be another one of these loudmouths on social media who's just treating it like a canvas, right? Who's just like pontificating their BS on the world and saying, this is my opinion, like it or leave it. I wanted to have a conversation, because what's the point of being amongst experts unless we're having a conversation? So that's how I approached it, right? Like I built the network first. I found as many people as I could. I think I had about 8,000 connections when I started truly posting regularly every day, maybe like 2 or 3 months into the pandemic. So maybe 18 months ago, I really started digging into that. And then it's been a consistent thing since, right? So I post 5 days a week. Once in a blue moon, I'll post on the weekends, but it's Monday through Friday. And then I follow a very specific format, right? So I only talk about 5 subjects. I talk about the things I find interesting or the things I'm an expert in. I talk about personal stories. I talk about humorous things that are just intrinsic to weed culture. I talk about specific chaotic things in the industry, like, hey, look at this stupid thing that's going on and check it out. And then I try to spice it up a little bit with generic stuff that has nothing to do with cannabis, right? So just PR or just marketing or just human things. And I bounce those back and forth so it's never stagnant. And that's kind of the whole secret sauce in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just, am I echo?
I hear the echo, but
You hear the echo?
Yeah,
I don't
do.
hear the echo.
You don't
Okay.
hear it? Cool.
Now it's resolved itself. I'm going to blame that on the live feed.
I just magic.
Yeah, magic. But no, I was going to ask Brett because I've noticed that I did like one comment or something on LinkedIn and it just kind of blew up. And then people would, DM you and start talking. I'm like, man, I have been ignoring this platform for a while because I was doing YouTube so much. But, looking at the two platforms, YouTube has given us just crap in this. And I'm not trying to bash them or anything like that. But, they will shut you down. They'll dial down the amount of views you get. Facebook has done the exact same thing. We have like a 300,000 page, Facebook page. No one cares because like you just don't even get served data. Have you noticed any, what do they call that? Censorship of your account through LinkedIn?
No, I've seen very little discussion. So I've seen a few instances for other people where like there was one particular guy who posted like pounds on deck and had like weed in trash bags. That got deleted. Matthew Harold, my buddy, who's a fellow, cannabis marketer, he got his account suspended for like 24 or 48 hours, but it had nothing to do with cannabis content. We actually threw a webinar about how to properly do LinkedIn, and LinkedIn flagged his account as a bot because he had too many people add him or like connect with him in too short of amount of time.
So he tripped an algorithm.
Right.
It was a different algorithm. Yeah.
Right. It wasn't a cannabis thing. And then lastly, Bill from Beard Bros Farms got his post deleted one time, and we still haven't figured out why, though it may, we still don't know. Like, right, it was like this very generic kind of square, hey, support Mammoth Distribution. They distribute our products throughout California. That was it. So that's the only 3 instances I've ever seen or heard of it, though I'm sure there's a few others. Let's call it like it is. As long as we're talking about cannabis as an industry and not just blatantly trying to sell weed to people through LinkedIn,
right,
it's probably going to be all right.
Yeah. And something different in the other one. I mean, like I did a video and it was how much does it cost to start a grow? And as soon as I uploaded it, it was already flagged on YouTube. Now, I did intersperse some stock footage of weed, which may have done it. But, it's just so difficult to try to get out there. And once you start even like growing, and then you'll be shut down. And then doing a few posts on LinkedIn and just seeing it like go out there and reverberate and reach more people. I'm like, you mean they don't censor you?
No. Now you can even add cannabis as a skill.
No, wow.
That's pretty awesome.
To do that.
But I think with LinkedIn though, you have to look at social media too as what's its intention. As far as like, Instagram is just pictures, and what are you going to really connect with on pictures? You're just trying to like look at my pretty flower. But LinkedIn was created as a business network. That was the intention behind it. But also, Brett, though, before like LinkedIn exists, before like actual real industry exists, people couldn't stand out there, right? Like you got out there during the Florida market, right? When that was your foot in the door.
Yep.
But like the before times, like before people could say, I am Brett Puffenbarger, like what, how do you think people can get to the masses without a LinkedIn? Do you think? Is there a way?
I don't know that there is a way. I guess if there is a way, it's going to be good old fashioned PR, right? Like aiming for publicity, because there are no community guidelines to what your local paper or your regional publication can cover. And a lot of the times that's as simple as approaching them, right? There are so many, let's back that up a little bit. The media has focused heavily on cannabis for the last probably 10 years. Like any major happening in cannabis, good, bad, or ugly, is going to get coverage. Unfortunately, most of the time, they don't know where to look. And it's not their fault. Like I'm not bashing journalists in that way to say like, they should have done their research. But how do they know? And if people were more, I guess you would call it, I don't know, if they thought ahead of it a little bit and they were a little proactive with their approach, reach out to your local reporters, call the local newspaper office, call the regional newspaper office, be a pain in their butt. It's almost the same thing as when we were all activists, right? Like when we were just advocates and we were calling a senator every week until they knew our name, when we were calling your local representative until they knew who we are. Do the same thing with the editor of your publications, right? Like eventually they're going to be like, well, maybe we should listen to this guy, or they might hate you, but they're at least going to know your name and they're going to think of it the next time a cannabis article comes up. Because if you look at it, it doesn't matter what mainstream news you're on, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, they all run at least one weed story a week. And if you ran one weed story a week, you got 52 points of contact in your name that's driving traffic in your direction, right?
Right.
Yeah, totally.
That's fascinating. So some of the just plain old-fashioned PR. That brings us to one of the other types of stories that was in the week that's kind of related to social media and weed. This one with Burner and Weed Maps are going to be launching a cannabis-friendly social media site. Do you think, because Cookies has really expanded well. How's Burner doing at his PR campaign, do you think?
So I think Cookies is a unique animal in that they are now a lifestyle brand who happens to sell weed. They're no longer necessarily a weed brand. And that's both good and bad, right? So like I can go buy a Cookies hoodie in Foot Locker. That's epic. Never has there been a level of acceptance of a cannabis brand in the mainstream world like that. On the flip side of that, my 14-year-old nephew wears Cookie sweatpants to school and gets away with it. And then I have to be upset. Like, are we grooming children? Are we doing this? Mm-hmm. So like, that's a bit of a double-edged sword in that their brand is now kind of seen as representative of cannabis as a whole, but it's almost like this old tongue-in-cheek way how we used to talk before we could put it on our resumes and talk about it openly, where it's like a joke, right? The whole concept of calling it 420 or something silly like that. They've done that. The whole idea of a cannabis-themed social media app, I don't want to say anything negative on Cookies because I think what they've done is really amazing. And I don't want to say anything negative about Weed Maps, though I will be honest, I've never logged into their software once in my entire life, ever. It just does not fit in my needs. Again, that's not a condemnation. It just is a fact. But it seems like they're redoing something that's already been done, right? There are already a couple of cannabis-specific social media apps. Trichome.com has one. There's Sizzlet with the Beard Bros guys. There's Hi Curious with my friend Lauren. Like there are cannabis social media apps already, right?
Weed Maps, Weed Life, Weedable, LeafWire, Bud Hubs, Mass Roots. That one is that's a throwback to.
Well, yeah. How many have come and gone? Because Mass Roots is still not around. And then there was the other one, Higher. The dude was based out of Massachusetts, but it had a really great format. But these guys seem to get started, collect the money, and then walk away and forget about like what the real intention was with that format, because
if I had to guess, I would say that the Weed Maps Burner social media play is more of a data collection idea so that they can understand consumer data in the cannabis space in a way that we don't currently, than it is going to be a true social media play, right? So like if you're smart and if you're capable, Instagram is an amazing business to consumer network. If you do it right? Like don't be just posting pictures of weed, but like the Beard Bros are a really good example, right? 115,000 followers, continuing to grow. All they do is aggregate news, like put out original content that has nothing to do with selling products. That's fine and dandy. There's no issue with that, right? And if you read carefully on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter community standards, there are ways around their bans, right? There's the whole concept of if it's advocacy, political, educational, that's perfectly allowed. You are allowed to educate about whatever you want. You can't sell, you can't cross into that world. And that's kind of where you're at with it, right?
Well, Beard Bros has faced some recent posts that are getting flagged. I've seen some ridiculous posts that you're like, why was this flagged? But you're right. We had earlier on in the show last year, we had the dude up north, Tom, the Indian chap. Anyways, he was talking about Instagram, how he would buy burner accounts so he could advertise because eventually, we can't advertise. We haven't been able to advertise with our Facebook page. Like, so Tom and I started his Facebook page. Well, Tom started it. I've been helping him with it for 10 years. Like, we started 10 years ago, nothing for sale. It's just entertainment and information. And, you know, we peaked out at 300,000 and we still have a pretty good outreach. Like right now I'm looking at our monthly numbers. We hit almost 70,000, 65,000 people in a month, which is still amazing for like stupid cat memes. But like, you know, there needs to be a non-shadow ban about this anymore. You know.
That's why. But I built everything for Cannabis Industry Lawyer on SEO, as I can't really buy, and now you kind of can. Like, I do have one Google ad running where it says like dispensary applications. I don't have the word cannabis in it, and it hasn't said no. But you know, it's that fine line where if I'm doing that webinar about like how to put together an application, there I'm now complicit in, you know, furtherance of this federal crime. And so that's when you usually see the social media accounts be like, ooh, we have to distance ourselves from this. Interesting that I have the Beard Brothers site up. So how long have you been with the Beard Brother people? I have to get a newsletter pop up on mine. I've been slacking on my newsletter game.
You gotta sign up right now while I'm watching. You got
there you go. I should. And then the create content button, I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, so we're actually getting ready to start kind of promoting that more. We just put together some finalized like contribution guidelines. So it's not just people putting out advertisements for their stuff. It's not low quality 400 word BS, right? Mm-hmm. So I actually started with Beard Bros as a client. So I own my own consulting company. Really the byline of that is, if you look at my resume, I look like any other corporate cannabis Chad, except I don't look like one as a person, and I don't live my life like that. So my whole goal was, how do we give the big guns to the little guys, right? How do we beat the big boys at their own game? How do we compete with them on marketing and social media and all of these different things? And I'll let you in on a little secret. I build almost everything with every client, like coin operations, so counterinsurgency operations. And this will be a little tongue in cheek and a little bit controversial, but like the biggest military in the world got their butt kicked by dudes in dresses and flip-flops for 20 years and ended up losing a war. That gives us some pretty darn good framework to work off of, right? So
sure, but Afghanistan was beating the crap out of USSR before it. And I mean, they have a history of playing this.
There's a history of that in general, right? Like, so the little guys can win if they follow a specific strategy. And I think what it takes is knowing the strategy of the big boys. I've worked in corporate cannabis. I understand how they function. I understand their limitations and their things like that, right? So if we can start implementing some of those mindsets into smaller cannabis operations, medium-sized cannabis operations, the non-corporate titan cannabis, we're golden. And then if you really look at it, like, kind of completely going full circle in the PR thing, public relations is a really simple game, right? Image plus identity equals reputation. Reputation is everything that is thought of your company. Identity is what you control. Image is what other people say about you. And if you look at the average big cannabis company, they have epically good identities, right? Like if I go on a True Leaf website or a Green Thumbs Industries website or another big boy, and I look at what they say about themselves, I would think they were the greatest company in the history of mankind, period. But if I go do some simple basic stuff like a Google search of their company name and scandal, lawsuit, charges, union,
bribe,
they're way open on that. So their identity and their image are way off. So their reputation is all dependent on perspective of who's looking at it. But for a small cannabis operator, if you look at what they're doing, you can beat them, right? Like they have cracks in their armor. It doesn't have to be David and Goliath. It's more like whoever took out Achilles with the arrow to the ankle. Like they've got exposure, right? They've got cracks in the armor.
I see what you're saying, and like, I think it sounds like you're summarizing high times for the past 10 years, but like, you know what I'm saying though? But like, here's my thing, and I hate to stroke my fucking own chain and all that shit, but like, I've been fucking writing about this goddamn plant for over 12 years online, and in the beginning, that's why Miggy 420, because it's not gonna come out with my own name, because like, oh hey, smoke if you got him,
smoke if you got him.
Thank you, Collateral Base.
Yep. Don't forget, you can buy stuff at the Collateral Base. Usually my services.
Pretty much.
Now, do I have to like mark this video as like a paid promotion because my company pays for me to do this?
That's an inceptionship. I don't think so right now.
Yeah, it's too meta. It's too meta of a question.
But Brad, back to like the corporate cannabis, the big blog people, like you were saying earlier, how there's no cannabis like news, right? There's no cannabis journalists per se, because that implies some like non-biased, like altruistic, like great, publishing of articles every day, pretty much. But like High Times, they really they were ahead of the game with even online. Back when Stephen Hager used to be, they used to stream goddamn cannabis cups, like even before streaming was a thing. Like you pay for, so they were always ahead of things until they weren't. And then the internet came about, and I just think people look at it as competition. Whereas if you, like you were talking about, like branding and being representation, like the Beard Bros, like I never had any of their weed, never can, because I'm living in Seattle, but I love their website and their news because I trust them as a source. But there's also this weird where people see the billion-dollar industry, which is just in one state. Now we're talking multi-billion with legal states, multi-billion legal industry. If you're a gateway of media for people, you could become a kingmaker. But like you have groups like, and I'm about to throw one out there, and I like your thoughts on this group because I still question who they are. But the Blacklist, the Blacklist, I question these guys. I've seen many articles. One about like they question whether they got dirt on burner. I've seen people who have been rubbed wrong. Visit their Instagram page. That's what they got, right? Like most of us have started with a Facebook page, an Instagram page. Somehow they get funding. See, I've been doing this thing for just trying to not go to jail. Like now with Tom, if I can get some funding, hell, I've been trying to even holler at what's a Fleshlight.
What's the business model of Beard Bros? And so like
they're
I'm a
first.
lawyer, and then I was a consultant, and I build stuff on the internet. And so you have to kind of figure out how the business model of a particular piece of media works. And I just don't get that. I don't understand the industry. I've never been in it,
So there's actually, Beard Bros is a couple of different things, right? So they're obviously a high THC brand available throughout California. That's first and foremost, they're license holders, right? They branched off into CBD and wellness products probably around the onset of the pandemic, because why not, right? If you've got the big following, if you've got the attention, you might as well start putting out products that are available to people like in your shoes that don't already have access to what they're currently doing. And then kind of came a breaking point for them where they realized that they were starting to put out more and more news and more information. And a big part of our relationship, so I kind of mentioned it earlier, they started as clients and now we're working more as partners, and we're driving toward a bigger thing that's not quite ready for announcement yet, but we're getting there, where it's a true reformation into a media company, right? Mm-hmm. Using that following to their advantage, being able to put good players and relevant people out there. Because let's call it like it is, they've built probably one of the most solid reputations of calling it like it is, being what they say they are, authenticity in its most true form. And if you can figure out how to, I guess, imbue or knight other people with that, that's a very powerful tool. And something we work on pretty regularly is events, companies, people always want to tap into that, right? You can even look at something like a couple of podcast interviews with like Kim Rivers from Trulieve, where she says she's buying clout, she's buying, community, she's buying into these things where by partnering with West Coast brands. And I think that does apply, but only if you have some morality to it. And by no means am I saying they don't, but look at the news. You can see for yourself.
Oh man, I just roasted her husband in 2 videos that I just did, because I have this new video that'll be coming out on Monday. Top 10 ways to get a cannabis license for 2022. One of them, spoiler alert,
Corruption,
bribes,
bribery.
bribes. Yeah. And then, but then
Threats.
I don't want to foreshadow, like, because it's a kind of a joke, because like the number, it's like a top 10 list type of thing. And so first it's bribes, and then there's a little play off of bribes. That's even a better idea than having yourself do the bribes. But, it's that's one of the ways, because we'll do a lot of stuff about the evolution of the policy. To get the money to be able to go prosecute them, you have to bring those bribery charges. But then you've placed these new entrepreneurs in a system that is evolving in real time, and the laws are actually changing. And so it is just that line, if there is one, in politics and in business, where people do quid pro quos. Why wouldn't cannabis have a whole bunch of it to go with? I mean, if industries as simple as ADM, I mean, you've seen that movie with Matt Damon, The Informant, where they were fixing the price of niacin for corn. If they were able to have corruption and in the ADM industry, of course they're going to have it in cannabis.
Matt Damon. Just but when we're for this discussion today, I Googled, cannabis social media, and then I came across this article by Curate. Because my point was earlier when we were talking about like how you started with LinkedIn, and then Facebook is just more for like entertainment, social value. Instagram is just for pictures. I think most people, and a lot of them are like followers of ours, is they don't know how to fucking work the internet. They don't know how to use social media. So like, why are you there? Why are you looking at Facebook? Why are you getting involved with this? So like, one of the things I thought was a great point in this article was, what's the point of your cannabis social business networks? So like, there's B2B sales. That's for some other, there's social medias like that.
LinkedIn exists for that.
LinkedIn networking.
Development. LinkedIn works.
Yeah, huge, like hiring, firing, and then news and discussion. News and discussion is really the one that can be Facebook and everything else. But depends on what you are, right? Like if you're a store, you're a grower. If you're a grower, be like the Beer Bros, and you'll fucking get a following of your flower that you just take pictures of. That's what I mean. There's not much discussion on Instagrams.
We're pretty close to getting. Well, I don't know. I mean, like the craft grow is going to get stood up. And then there's more information from the Department of Agriculture. And it turns out another one of my clients actually won a dispensary as well. So better content and that type of inside access coming. It's going to take forever. I mean, Brett, you're in Virginia. There's really no licenses on the East Coast except for those huge big boys that are out there. I mean, the mom and pop shops, to the extent that they exist. And do they? I mean, talking about mom and pop shops, that was the story out of Illinois, where Dispensary 33 signed a deal where they're selling their 2 Chicago locations for $55 million to Air Wellness. 2 dispensaries, $55 million.
Damn.
Yeah.
That hurts my brain.
It's like, I don't know who walked out or walked away with that kind of money.
I look at it pretty simply, right? So everything west of the Mississippi, by and large, is mom and pops and craft grows and horizontal license structure, and it's very much the core of that. And then what happened is Florida went legal, and it's like a whole bunch of venture capitalist lawyers, bankers. No offense, lawyer, but you know what I'm saying.
I was also a banker. I was a bank lawyer.
Right, a bunch of those guys went, that makes sense. They saw what Florida did and putting out just a piece of paper is worth $55 million, right? Like you can see stuff in ludicrous valuations coming out of that state. And it's like the rest of the East Coast states, and including kind of the North Midwest, if you want to count like Illinois and some of those states, kind of went, that's how we do it. All we have to do is stack the deck in our favor. And then we come up with these kind of fake talking points of like stable markets and health and safety, and whatever they want to call it. And that's going to be I'm going to go off way to the right for a second. And
go for it. I'm going to dip out and come back to see if my echoing thing goes away.
Sounds
I hear
good.
you.
So my thought here is real simple. I think upon federal legalization, we're going to see, if we want to see a successful version of it, it's going to be a whole lot more like the milk industry than anything else. And I know that sounds ludicrous.
Yeah, how so?
Think about how the milk, let me back this up a little bit. Think about how the MSOs are structured. All of the big corporate cannabis companies are vertically integrated from seed to sale. Start thinking there and go, what other industry does that, right? None. Nobody has vertical integration to the degree we have here.
Right.
Then you start looking at they exist in a silo within individual states, right? So each state is its own set of rules, and their business model is not meant for basic things like traditional unit economics, producer and consumer states, yada, yada, yada. So in my mind, what's going to happen is upon federal legalization and upon interstate commerce, what really needs to happen is, like I mentioned while he was gone, a milk model, right? A single, you think my laptop? I can fix that.
I think that's the echo we hear. Because sometimes when it compensates, because there you go. Now it's gone. It's like magic.
Yeah, but Miggy is an ISO guy, so like he's a certifications guy, so he's always talking about the specs and the GMP, and so he's in a Cal lab, and he's like, I think it's this, and he was right.
Give me glasses.
Did I fix it?
Yeah, you're good, bro.
Change my microphone, so that guy can go away now. So the milk model is pretty simple, right? There's one large industry group that put together the Got Milk campaign, and it's all about awareness, and it's not specific to anybody. And then what you have is a network of small farmers who all collaborate to a large centralized regional processing hub, who then distribute to a varied network of retailers. And we already kind of see that in the license structure of cannabis, right? Like something ridiculous, like 94% of licenses go to cultivation or retail, meaning 6% of the market is supporting that. So if we look at that, right, like if we look at it how it's already playing out, it's not that dissimilar, right? A whole bunch of farmers put all of their stuff into a processing facility, which we see in the extraction realm or the packaging realm or the distribution realm. And then it all gets proliferated out to a bunch of different stores. So like if I live here in Virginia, I have access to Shenandoah Pride milk. And if I go buy Shenandoah Pride milk, I can go buy that at Food Lion or Martin's or Whole Foods or whatever, Wegmans. Or on the alternative of that, I also have several varieties that are available, except the same truck drops them off every day. They're getting processed at the same facility. They're just coming from different farmers. So the way I see it is we really want a thriving industry that allows both sides to play, right? If we're not playing favorites and we go, I want craft farmers and small businesses, and I also want corporations to be able to do all of the things they do at scale.
Yeah.
Milk is the answer.
I hear you. I just think, too, the lowest denominator is still going to be like, $500,000, which the average person doesn't have, right? Like, and not until the banking rules.
Well, the average person doesn't have the money for a milk farm either.
True.
Like the milk farm's not cheap,
But with cannabis, you have to stay more liquid because the damn law keeps changing on these people. Like that's the only reason. Like I'm so grateful and wish like in Washington State, like I wish I bought clones and started my own stuff back then. But then I see the rigmarole these people go through. Man, I could have went all in and lost it all right in the transition to 502 out here. So, I just think, until safe banking is a thing, because we're talking about equity for everybody, and equity is a chance to just get involved in this damn market, but Brett, back to the social, the gateways though, because like, I mentioned the blacklist, and I just think that I see people who are getting ready for like, they're trying to create these funnels of like, we are your authoritative, because they have like 20 goddamn people. Weird me out when you have a Facebook page with like every fucking city in the world, or like every, what I mean? Like, it seems a little excessive. I get that you're in this market, but like, why can't you just be that one page?
You're casting a wide net. So
yeah,
let me start with, I like the blacklist. I'll be at their Hall of Flowers party. I have no problem with them as people. I question the business model in the sense that there is a fine line between talking trash and providing a service. And I think that fine line lies on, do you provide the solution to, right? Like, there's one thing to call out all of the bad stuff that happens. And I probably tread that line pretty heavily with a lot of my LinkedIn content, right? Like, I spend a lot of time poking at the things that are problems. I spend a lot of time bringing the stuff we all talk about behind closed doors out in the open, the water cooler talk, the things you talk about at your smoke circle, where you start realizing that it's not just your company, it's not just your store, it's not just your state, it's a systemic problem of a boom industry or a nascent industry that we are. That's one thing, right? And the blacklist does an amazing job of poking that bear and pointing at the problem. And by no means am I saying they're messed up or wrong, but they're
Right.
missing the key point of there must be a solution on the other end of that, right? And to
Yeah.
me, that doesn't seem sustainable. And that's something we've tried to build as Beard Bros has moved into a media outlet. And I feel like a lot of people put us in like the competition bucket, right? Or they're similar or we're similar. And something we've always tried to do is don't just cover the bad. Cover the bad. Heck yeah, that needs to be talked about. But let's also talk about who's fixing it. Let's talk about who's doing right. Let's talk
Sure.
about who's doing the good things.
Well, you know, cannabis is still a weird animal. Where like people, like for Tom and I, sometimes like we're surprised. Like we got 30,000 people within like 2 years or whatever it was. You know, like we got a lot of people. But then, you know, we talked to some really cool people like Keystropp and Danny and stuff. But a lot of times it's weird because like I'll show up to an event and people recognize who I am for what I've been doing and done. And the thing is, people in the know, right? Like, you know, like the goal is to have 100 million fucking followers and never like, you know, you have a billion views and be cool and get paid that way. But we don't, and it's fine. But the thing is like people are trying to create this gateway of information. Like we are the you know, we're your trusted source. And then I totally get the opinion bias part because, like I was saying, I've been writing this for 12 years, and one of the first websites that I helped out with, the Brickweed, you know, I'm very, very ex-girlfriendish about these people. I'm like, fuck these people. Like every time I discuss them, but I also have the receipts for things that I don't think as a human being they should have done. But it's like people in the know, and but most people don't give a fuck. It's very disheartening and very frustrating at the same time, you know, because
I think people don't care because they don't know there's an alternative, right? Like it kind of drills down to I've actually been writing an article that'll be coming out on the Beard Bros site in a couple of days about the difference in buying in and selling out, right?
mm,
A very fine line that's between those things. A lot of people sell out because they don't know they have the ability to buy in. And the place that this is, there's two places that I'm viewing that this is the most apparent. One is large West Coast brands selling out to East Coast brands and then acting like they don't see it, right? Like they're like, oh, what do you mean they have scandals or they're just chads or whatever, you know, silly term we want to call it. And then you show them, and then there's like that whole cognitive dissonance thing because it's too late. They're already down the path. They can't stop it. The other side I see that playing out pretty often is when equity licenses are granted, like social equity or inclusion licenses are granted, and then they sell out for 10% of their true value to a big MSO, and it's quickly becoming not true social equity. It's becoming a cheap buy-in methodology for the MSOs because they will court them back to the PR thing we talked about a minute ago.
What are you saying? Yeah, what you're saying.
With their great identity, right? They will blast their identity, what they say about them, and they will give them this sense of false security, and then they will just rip it out from under them. Mm-hmm. And they'll go, huh? And then people wonder why it happens, and then they go, why was I hurt again, right? And it all drives back to what's the definition of insanity? Allowing the same thing to happen over and over and over. And
no, yeah, we talk about that and the history always repeating itself because people just don't remember enough. But you know, what you said is correct. And there's just the secondary market. It's like, oh, well, we won't be able to apply. Well, that's fine. We'll just keep our powder dry, stack the money over there. As soon as they hand out those licenses and all that lawsuit crap's already done, we'll just come in and buy them out. And they just have their money, and then they come in and they buy them out. And some people are applying for that lottery ticket like it is a flip, in the sense that they spent maybe $200,000 on this business plan that was in an application. It hit. That asset's now worth $5 million. They're done. I mean, like, this worked great. And some people actually want to be in and operate and have the license. And it's so restrictive that, you know, it's been a lot of, it's been very rewarding assisting social equity people get what they're worth, and then seeing how New Jersey's handling it to really put the kibosh on the shenanigans that are going on out there in jurisdictions like Illinois that don't have definitions of financial source agreements. And so I'm pushing back on people that are trying to crush down social equity down to, like, you know, a tiny fraction of a holding for a tiny fraction of a payout. And I'm like, Well, let's request a valuation. No, I'll call the valuation firm. They'll give you an opinion regarding what they think the value of your license is worth based on its potential future earnings. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. So, just keep pushing back on that, but it's not required like it is in New Jersey. And so I'm very eager to see the Jersey application window coming up here in a few weeks and setting up these companies, because, I set them up before, but now I get to set them up with like requirements and conditions, and I can just like phase it out. Be like, here's phase one. This is how much you've invested. Now you've hit that. Okay, phase two, and hopefully, like, we'll see. But I think a lot of the shenanigans might be put down because of their usage of the financial source agreements. On the other side of that coin, I'm looking at it like a hedge fund and going like, oh, I can have a portfolio of companies. These are my social equity companies. These are minority-owned companies, and that is a little silly.
And you guys are talking about like a higher level. Like I really do like your comparison of selling out or buying in, right? Like I'm really proud of Tom because he's done a really, like I've known Tom since MySpace, and I know Tom because
I was Tom from MySpace.
But I know Tom from weed advocacy. You know what I mean? Like I knew this guy as a straight guy. Like yeah, we've interacted online for years, and then I've helped him with like the internet, pages and stuff. So it's like Tom figured out how to buy in. He figured out, like how to attribute his lawyer skills. And I think most people don't understand that. Like you have a skill set you can bring into cannabis. You don't have to goddamn grow all the time, right? And I mean, you did. You found it as a PR guy.
Yeah. Have you told the story of how you got into cannabis yet on this broadcast? Because we mentioned it previously, but I thought that was in the green room beforehand, right?
Yeah, I think it was.
All right. Well, tell people how you got into cannabis.
So it started. So I found cannabis as a medicine or a drug or a thing for enjoyment in my late 20s, and I got into an argument with an ex-girlfriend, and she said something mean like, I hear veterans do great when they smoke weed. You should go smoke a joint. And I had no idea how. Like I didn't know where to buy it. I didn't know anything. The only person I knew that smoked weed was her mom. So I bought an eighth for like $80. Cue laughter. Everybody can make fun of me. I Googled how to make a gravity bong on YouTube. Like I figured it out on my own. And then I loved it and I didn't stop. And there was a couple of years of me, doing the normal thing, doing the advocacy thing, speaking out, doing all those things. And then right around the time it went legal in Florida, I had sold a motorcycle to one of the founders of one of the first cannabis companies in Florida. And I got fired for failing a P test because somebody knocked a motorcycle off a trailer while
What year is this then?
2016.
It's still mandated, I'm sure. As soon as something goes wrong, you're like, give him a P test so we can fire him for drug use.
Yeah. And I wasn't even there, mind you. Like I was at lunch when it happened. I came back and they were like, oh, so-and-so knocked a bike off the trailer. Like everybody's getting P tested. And I was like,
that might be the policy because then that's the Drug-Free America Act. So you're allowed to maintain that. But if you do have that policy, it has to apply to everybody. So it's not like, well, why are you only giving me the P test? Because we watched you push over the bike.
But still, what a dumb policy, though. I mean, you're catching again. We've talked about this.
Compliance. And so we're in the compliance industry now with cannabis, and just like all these other industries where they're trying to comply with workplace safety acts or some types of drug-free act, they're trying to comply with some federal policies. So a corporate lawyer that's in employment law comes up with something that he can then sell as a package for hours of time to an employer.
Facts.
Yep.
So yeah, I got fired from my job. And I called the guy and was like, hey, I was good enough to sell you a motorcycle. Can I sell you some weed for you? And the rest was history.
That's
pretty awesome, dude.
Yep. And then you were working in the dispensary that day as a bud tender.
No, actually, I started as a general manager. So there's kind of this thing about Harley that a lot of people don't realize. Harley makes more money selling T-shirts than they do motorcycles.
Holy shit.
Once you hit so I was a director of business development there. So once you hit the biz dev level, you're working two different worlds, right? It's not that different than a car dealership or any other, item dealership, like big ticket purchase, but it's also a full blown retail experience, right? Like more people are buying T-shirts and jackets and helmets and gloves and keychains and whatever the hell else. So in effect, I made kind of the mistake a lot of people do when they jump into cannabis, and I didn't realize my value, and I took the step down, right? I went from director to a manager, and I kind of had this idea in my head. I'm like, oh, I'll just work my way back up. We'll be all right, right? Like that's how it works. It's meritocracy, America. And we all know that's not true. And then, truth be told, a lot of my journey has been a whole lot of what predicated the deal with Beard Bros, the whole Project Mongoose thing that I kind of gained notoriety for at first. Collecting stories of all the bullshit, the BS that happens in the cannabis world, and giving it a home and somewhere where people can freely and openly talk about it, even if it's anonymously. And all that came because I experienced it, right? Like I worked for shady companies who did shady things in cannabis. And then I also ran one of the largest veterans cannabis charities in the country. And we worked with a boatload of cannabis companies. So I really got this very unique view, kind of from the outside, kind of from the inside, but always part of the greater industry vibe that really showed me the BS, right? And then it was like, it's kind of, so it's all very much like, as silly as it sounds, predicated on personal experience. Except the thing I figured out pretty early on is that it's not just my personal experience. It's everybody who's ever worked in weeds at every level, unless they're part of the problem, right?
Nice. Did you see there's a cannabis comic? I can't remember. He makes comic strips based out of like Maine
Box
and
Brown.
Boston. The one where he shows them vacuuming goddamn spider mites off. What the fuck? But yeah, I'm glad you know.
I want to work with that guy. I want to do comics. There was actually a different guy in Florida who did like funny Bitmoji videos with slightly off names of all the chaotic and crappy people in the Florida market.
Oh my god!
So they would do like whatever, Plim Plivers or like Tim Clivers, and then it would be like a picture and like, yeah, this guy is great.
Box Brown. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Brett, and telling us something that I didn't know. Miggy already knew this stuff, but of course he didn't tell me. And Box Brown was the guy, so I'm gonna have to check that out later. That's pretty cool.
He does comic strips about what happens. So like any of the big news happenings in cannabis, he breaks it down in this very cute, like cartoony way, where like there is no ifs, ands, or buts, right? He erases the gray area of the conversation. It's just like, this guy did this thing at this time, and this is why. Here you go.
Yeah, people are really good at having an axe to grind and saying and an intention and something that they're doing for it, and putting on a completely different face. It's the business aspect of the cannabis industry. I didn't think it was going to be as I don't know. I guess I was naive. But you're just seeing the stuff that they do, and when they're trying to offer to buy out licenses and the terms and all that stuff, it's theft, And then not only that, it's the social equity component of it. And there's no like guardrails in the Illinois social equity, and a lot of them, I'm assuming. So probably in California on the more municipal areas, but social equity is like brand new, and trying to give licenses based on those.
Some of the new states are doing okay, right? So like up until a year ago or the last 6 months or so, you had the two ends of the spectrum. You had ultra limited license, regulatory capture, vertical integration, the Floridas of the world. And then you kind of had this other side of the equation that is kind of playing out in Oklahoma now, where it was like $2,500 and you're in. Yep. And everybody can play, and you end up with 15,000 licenses for 3 million people. You're not sustaining that, right? Like that's never going to happen. And what we're seeing now is something like what Virginia has proposed, or New Jersey or New York, where it's mildly limited caps, right? Like they've actually looked at some numbers, right? Like somebody out there was smart enough to go like, this is the estimated amount of patients. This is the, average amount people buy a month. How many places can that actually support? And they're putting mild license caps. And by that, I mean something like, what did Virginia say? Like 450 dispensaries, 150 extraction places, 1,000 grows, something like that, right? Like it's enough that realistically, that's how many can successfully do it. And it kind of works, right? Like I think we're finally getting to a point where that balance. And then if you look at specifically Virginia and New Jersey, they've made some very specific carve-outs for social equity where you can't look at it as a flip anymore. They must maintain ownership or they lose the license. And I think that's a beautiful play, right?
That, and then I can't, because like I'm going to set these suckers up in Jersey. So like, it's going to be convertible debt and all this other stuff, but at least they're providing the ground rules so that, I don't feel like I'm being a jerk of a lawyer that's just sitting there creating this bullshit sandwich that's going to pass the smell test when the regulators look at it, and then boom, it's some other deal. I didn't do that for any of my clients. I'm like, no, this is a really sticky operating agreement. Good luck changing it unless you have like complete agreement. And so seeing the stuff coming out of Jersey gives me a lot of hope and optimism to kind of marry the liquidity partners, which are people that just have like a couple $1 million sitting in their bank account and they want to put it to work, with also the social equity applicants that'll be able to be the most likely to win a license.
You know what's crazy in the world of shadow bans and social medias of popping out and everywhere else, all the new stuff coming out. Tubi's Freak Brothers is the most watched free streaming service, like the Freak Brothers.
Freak
the new
Brothers.
2 days ago, as of Core Cutters News. Pretty awesome that the Freak Brothers is the most watched on Tubi. I just thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, but isn't that like 7 people? Isn't that how like Tubi works? Like there's like 5 people that are watching.
I don't know,
I have
dude.
no idea how many people.
That means
are
there's at
Tubi,
least 6 watching it. God damn it!
I didn't know it was called Tubi until just now. I thought it was Tubby. Like
It might be Tubby. I could be selling it wrong too. Tubby. Nobody corrects me.
I don't know. I can't just believe how many streaming services there are, and I still can't figure out the business model of media. And then yet here I am talking to people on the internet, trying to support my law firm and consulting company instead.
Hey, Brett, did you guys cover Uber getting into the weed market?
Not yet, though I believe we're going to touch on that sometime the end of the week. I think we were focused on some other stuff right now. We got Hall of Flowers and Emerald Cup coming up. So
Another Hall of Flowers. Damn.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. What is the Hall of Flowers and when is the Emerald Cup? Because I do know what that is, but I don't know what the Hall of Flowers is.
So Hall of Flowers, in my view, and somebody from there will probably be mad because we're exclusive media partners and I'm not going to say it the way they would. But Hall of Flowers is effectively Baby MJ BizCon for a specific region in California. So it's a business-to-business market where buyers and sellers and a very small select group of media can come together and interact in a big way in California specifically. It's put together by Green Street, so like Rama and Gary Vee's company. It's kind of geared toward being that, right? And then, of course, Emerald Cup is like the end-all be-all of who actually has the best weed and how can we support the small farmers. So Hall of Flowers is December 8th and 9th. Emerald Cup is the 11th and 12th. So my wife / partner at Good Ideas and I are hopping on a plane on the 7th. Bill from Beard Bros is picking up us up at the airport. We're grabbing David Palachuk, the guy who wrote Branding Bud. And we're going to run to our right? Like what a cool Airbnb to hang out in, right? I'm trying to convince them to let me do road cone gravity bongs in the pool. I don't know if anybody's agreed to it yet, but that's my goal. I guess we're going to have to find a road cone. So we're going to go, Palm Springs, 2 nights, 2 days, got a couple of cool after parties. The guys from Weed, the guys from Emerja Labs, I believe Dr. Green Thumbs and Be Real have one. So we're going to hit all of those over that like 2 days time span. And then we're going to road trip all the way from Palm Springs to LA. Wake up the next morning in LA. We're going to hop on the highly capitalized news show for me and Bill that morning. And then we're going to jump in the car, drive like 7 hours through San Francisco to Santa Rosa, 2 days of Emerald Cup, and then a quick jaunt back to Sacramento. And then I fly home. Yep.
Sacramento airport's not bad. That's why I went into that one instead of San Francisco. I didn't want to fly into that when I went up to Benbow for my Ganjier certifications. But that sounds like a excellent adventure that you're going to be having here in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty stoked. So here's a fun fact. I've worked with many California brands before. I've never been to California for anything other than military training when I was still in the Marine Corps.
This is going to be much more fun for you, though.
And we're doing like 70% of the state, right? We're going from like almost as SoCal as it gets to like the very bottom of NorCal. And we're going to see like a whole bunch of stuff in the way. So
you're a Hollywood Marine?
No, I went to Paris Island, homie.
Oh, shit. Oh, wait, did they still have that boot camp while you were there?
Yep. Yeah. So we still do split boot camp. No, they do a Mojave Viper, which is like the desert training for Iraq and Afghanistan, because right there in the Mojave Desert, they've got true deserts, which is similar to Iraq, and they've got mountainous and mountain combo similar to Afghanistan. So all Marines, most Navy, and some Army all go to 29 Palms, which is right beside Palm Springs, for like a big training exercise. It's like a month long, like a month or so before you deploy each time. So I did 3 deployments. So I think I ended up there 3 times, except the farthest I ever saw was the inside of the Palm Springs airport for about 15 minutes. And then we snuck off base and went to a bar. Oh God, I hope it's after the statute of limitations on USC charges, whatever. So I saw a bar in Palm Springs, California, for about an hour and a half, and then I saw the inside of the Palm Springs airport, and that's about it.
Damn, how long were you in the Marines?
5 years.
Wow. 3 tours in 5 years? Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, dude.
I've got 2 veterans on the show. This is.
I did. I went back to back. So I went Fallujah, came home, was home about 3 months. They offered me the ability to deploy with a West Coast unit because I was stationed at Camp Lejeune. Yeah. So I went, yeah, I'm in. Like, send me back. Went to Al Assad, then got back, spent about 8 months home, and then did a MEU and floated all over the Atlantic and Africa and did a bunch of cool stuff, and then came back.
You were single, right? When you were able to volunteer to go back in?
No, I was married, and that is why I was not married anymore the first time.
Sorry,
the first time. Well, we always learn that lesson. And I just wanted to thank Brett for coming by and sharing some of his wisdom from working in PR in the cannabis industry. And I really appreciate your time. And then I also really appreciate all of our members that have provided some financial, shillings for us. And then also all the likes and subscribes that we get. Brett, have a great time in California. And please share some of that stuff on your LinkedIn so we can kind of follow the adventure.
I've got LinkedIn Live as of like 48 hours ago, so I plan on giving everybody like full unfettered access to me running around like a kid in a candy shop.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun going to Humboldt. So like that little adventure that you're going to go on sounds like just great. So all right, everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll see you after the holiday.